I am Ariana Wells, and I am 34 years old. On the morning my life quietly split in two, I was sitting at a long glass conference table on the 22nd floor of a corporate building in uptown Charlotte, North Carolina, trying to convince myself that professionalism could protect me from humiliation. From the outside, I looked calm, hands folded neatly, posture straight, eyes focused. Inside, I felt exhausted in a way sleep had never cured. The kind of tiredness that comes from carrying silence for too long. Before I continue, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Stories like this reach people who are silently enduring pressure, injustice, and betrayal in their workplaces, and your support helps these stories travel to the people who need them most. It was a Monday morning, and the office buzzed with quiet tension. The kind that hides beneath polite greetings and forced smiles. Coffee machines hummed. Keyboards clicked too fast. People avoided eye contact as they filed into the conference room. Everyone knew this meeting wouldn't be easy. Meetings at Hale and Crest Advisory rarely were. At the front of the room stood Victor Hale. Victor was tall, sharply dressed, and carried himself like a man who never doubted his own importance. His suits were tailored, his shoes polished, his voice smooth and confident. People respected him publicly. Some feared him privately. He had a way of smiling that looked friendly from a distance but felt cold up close. I had seen that smile before. It usually meant someone was about to be embarrassed. Victor clicked to the next slide and cleared his throat. "We need to talk about the Wells portfolio review," he said casually. My chest tightened. "There were serious issues," he continued. "Miscalculations. Overlooked details. Poor judgment." Every eye in the room turned toward me. I blinked slowly, grounding myself. "I reviewed that report twice," I said carefully. "Those numbers weren't there when I submitted it." Victor raised his hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Excuses don't fix incompetence, Ariana," he said, his voice growing louder. Then he laughed lightly, as if this were a joke meant to entertain the room. "This is what happens when people take on responsibility they're not ready for." The room went silent. No one spoke. No one moved. The air felt heavy, almost thick. I noticed someone near the back slowly lift their phone, pretending to check a message while quietly recording. My face burned, but I stayed still. This wasn't the first time Victor had done this. It was just the first time he'd done it to me, publicly. I heard my mother's voice in my head, soft but firm. "No one to walk away. But don't walk away silent." Victor leaned back in his chair, pleased with himself. "We can't afford mistakes like this," he said, smiling. My hand stopped shaking. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my bag and pulled out a plain white envelope. Without rushing, without drama, I stood up and placed it on the table in front of him. "This is my resignation," I said. Gasps filled the room. Someone whispered my name. Victor laughed, surprised but amused. "Well," he said, "that saves us some trouble." I met his eyes. My voice was quiet, steady. "And this," I said, "is only the beginning." Then I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, the laughter stopped. When I glanced back just once, Victor's smile was gone. For the first time, he looked confused, almost worried. He didn't know yet what I knew. I was raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs and still came home tired but proud. She cleaned office buildings at night and stocked grocery shelves during the day. She taught me one simple rule: work hard, stay quiet, and don't give people a reason to doubt you. I grew up watching her survive without complaints, watching her swallow exhaustion and still show up. Silence to her wasn't weakness, it was survival. And I learned early that silence often felt safer than speaking up. I was the first in my family to finish college. No favors. No shortcuts. Every step of my career was carefully planned. I arrived early, stayed late, and double-checked everything I touched. I believed that if I was good enough, no one could hurt me. I believed excellence would protect me. I avoided conflict whenever possible. When people spoke over me, I stayed polite. When credit was taken from my work, I swallowed the anger and kept moving. I told myself patience was maturity. But silence had already failed me once before. Years earlier, I had been in a relationship where I slowly disappeared. Every time something felt wrong, I told myself I was overreacting. Every time I wanted to speak, I stayed quiet to keep the peace. By the time I finally left, my confidence was gone, and I blamed myself for staying so long. I promised myself I would never let that happen again. But old habits don't disappear easily. Hale and Crest Advisory looked perfect from the outside. Respected firm. High-profile clients. Long hours that promised long-term rewards. Inside, the culture was cold and tense. People whispered instead of speaking openly. Favoritism decided who advanced and who stayed stuck. Mistakes were punished harshly, especially if the wrong person made them. HR existed only in name. Victor ruled the office with charm and fear. In public, he praised teamwork and professionalism. In private, he was cruel and calculated. He knew how to intimidate without raising his voice. He made threats sound like advice. He rewarded loyalty and punished honesty. He saw my talent clearly. That was the problem. As long as I stayed quiet, he could use my work. But if I ever spoke up, I became dangerous. The truth started weeks before the meeting, on a quiet evening when most people had already gone home. I was reviewing reports for the third time, doing what I always did, checking every detail. Something felt wrong. Numbers didn't match. Dates were shifted. On their own, they looked like simple mistakes. Together, they told a different story. I followed the trail carefully. The deeper I looked, the clearer it became. Decisions had been rewritten. Errors made by Victor were being quietly pushed onto his team. Worse, one altered report carried my name, my digital signature. My hands went cold as I stared at the screen. This wasn't carelessness. It was planned. A few days later, I asked Victor for a private meeting. His office was spotless, just like his image. He listened as I spoke, calm and respectful, explaining what I had found. I didn't accuse him. I only asked for clarity. Victor smiled. He leaned back in his chair and spoke softly, like a mentor giving advice. He told me I was misunderstanding things, that I should be careful, that careers could be damaged by confusion. Then he said the sentence that stayed with me. No one believes women who make noise. I understood then that it was a warning. If I spoke, I would be destroyed. If I stayed quiet, I might survive. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, I made a decision. I began documenting everything. By the time Victor said my name in that meeting, I knew what he was doing. He wasn't reacting, he was attacking first. He suspected I knew something, and he wanted to break me publicly before I could speak. But the resignation letter in my bag wasn't weakness. It was timing. Walking away wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, my name was already moving through the office without me. Group chats buzzed. Side conversations grew louder, and then stopped when someone noticed who was listening. Stories changed with every retelling. Some people said I had snapped. Others said I couldn't handle the pressure. No one talked about what Victor had done. Silence protected the powerful, just like it always had. On LinkedIn, vague posts began to appear. Leadership requires resilience. Not everyone is built for high-performance environments. No names were mentioned, but I didn't need them spelled out. Recruiters who once replied within hours suddenly went quiet. Emails went unanswered. Interviews were postponed without explanation. My professional world began to shrink in real time. At home, the silence felt heavier than the noise ever had. Friends tried to comfort me in the ways people do when they don't know what to say. You did the right thing, they said. Just move on. Others warned me gently. Fighting powerful people never ends well. Even kindness felt like pressure. My mother listened more than she spoke. She asked careful questions about my savings, my rent, my plans. She reminded me how hard I had worked to get where I was. Fear sat between us, unspoken but real. Some nights, I stared at the ceiling replaying the meeting again and again. My chest tightened without warning. Breathing became shallow. Panic arrived suddenly and left me shaking, embarrassed, angry at myself for feeling weak. I blamed myself for staying silent too long. Then I blamed myself for speaking at all. The old pattern crept back quietly. Maybe silence would have been easier. Inside Hale and Crest Advisory, the atmosphere shifted. Victor became stricter. Meetings grew shorter. Smiles disappeared. He demanded loyalty and speed, praised obedience, and punished hesitation. People learned quickly to nod instead of asking questions. Evan Cole, still new and eager, was called into Victor's office repeatedly. Each time, he came out pale and quiet. Victor told him to fix numbers. When Evan hesitated, Victor reminded him how replaceable he was. Evan complied, hating himself more each time. Margaret Sloan from HR sent out company-wide emails warning employees not to spread misinformation or damage company culture. No one asked questions. Fear did the work for management. Waiting became the hardest part. Days passed with no updates. Doubt grew heavier. I wondered if I had misunderstood everything, if I had ruined my career over paranoia. Shame whispered that I was alone because I deserved to be. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. The compliance investigator responded. The message was short, professional, controlled. They had reviewed my initial concern. They wanted evidence, documents, records, names, timelines. My hands shook as I read it. This was real now. There was no turning back. As I gathered the files I had saved, emails, report versions, timestamps, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about one meeting or one man. The pattern was clear. The harm was shared. I wasn't alone. I had just been first. The announcement came quietly but hit hard. One morning, Hale and Crest Advisory sent a company-wide email announcing an external audit. The language was careful, polished, legal. But everyone understood what it meant. Something was wrong. Outsiders were coming in to look closely. Victor was blindsided. He kept smiling in meetings, but fear showed in his eyes. He suspected me immediately. I could see it in the tension of his jaw, the way his gaze lingered on empty chairs. For the first time, he had no power over me. 2 nights later, there was a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Victor stood there like he belonged. He smiled warmly, commented on how tired I looked, asked how I was holding up. He spoke about stress, misunderstandings, pressure. He suggested we could help each other. I said nothing. When charm didn't work, his tone changed. He warned me about legal consequences, about powerful people, about how long investigations could last. Then, without realizing it, he spoke the truth. I needed someone to take the fall, he said calmly. That's how things work. My phone recorded everything. After he left, I stood there shaking, but calm. I sent the recording to the investigator. The twist came from somewhere I didn't expect. The video from the meeting leaked online. Someone had posted the clip of Victor humiliating me in front of the entire office. It spread quickly, not with rage, but recognition. This happened to me. I know that look. I worked for him. Documents followed. Emails. Reports. Timelines. Together, they told a story many people already knew too well. Former employees came forward. Some anonymously. Some publicly. Clients began asking questions. Then they pulled contracts. The board had no choice. Victor Hale was suspended pending investigation. His name disappeared from the website. The man who once controlled everything was suddenly silent. I didn't feel joy. I felt relief. Justice didn't arrive loudly. It came quietly, like truth usually does. Weeks later, it was confirmed. Victor was fired. No public apology. No dramatic announcement. Just removal. The company reached out to me soon after. Their lawyers spoke carefully. They offered $380,000 and an NDA in exchange for silence. Closure without truth. I said no. When everything slowed down, the exhaustion caught up. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. Other days anxiety arrived without warning. Healing wasn't linear. I started therapy. At first, words didn't come. Then they did. Fear, shame, years of shrinking myself to survive. Slowly, I learned to rest without guilt. My relationship with my mother changed. We talked honestly about survival and silence. I saw her strength differently, not as quiet, but as endurance. Months later, I joined a smaller consulting firm. Lower pay, better values, ethical work, safe conversations. Lena joined. Then Evan. Mistakes were discussed, not punished. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to disappear to stay safe. Time changed everything, but not all at once. After Victor's dismissal, the world didn't suddenly feel safe or fair. There was no dramatic sense of victory, no applause, no moment where everything made sense. What followed instead was quiet. A strange, unfamiliar quiet that felt heavier than the chaos had ever been. For a long time, I didn't know what to do with it. The adrenaline that had carried me through the investigation faded, and what remained was exhaustion layered with grief. Not grief for Victor or the job, but grief for the version of myself who had believed silence was protection. Grief for all the moments I had stayed small so others could stay comfortable. Some mornings, I woke up tense for no clear reason. My body remembered fear even when my mind tried to move on. Loud sounds startled me. Emails from unknown senders made my chest tighten. Healing didn't arrive neatly. It came in waves, progress followed by setbacks, clarity followed by doubt. Therapy became a place where I learned to tell the truth slowly. At first, I talked about work, about policies, about stress. Then the layers peeled back. We talked about control. about manipulation disguised as leadership, about how environments teach you who you're allowed to be. I realized how deeply I had learned to equate worth with endurance. I wasn't weak for surviving, but survival alone was no longer enough. The new consulting firm felt unreal at first. Meetings were calm. People disagreed without punishment. Questions were welcomed. When mistakes happened, no one raised their voice. Accountability existed, but it wasn't cruel. I kept waiting for the tension to return, for someone to snap, for fear to settle back into the room. It didn't. When Lena Brooks joined the firm, we talked late one evening after work. She admitted how afraid she had been back then, how guilt had followed her home every night. Saying the truth out loud didn't erase the past, but it loosened its grip. When Evan Cole arrived months later, he apologized without being prompted. Not because he had been the villain, but because he had been afraid. We talked about fear, about power, about how systems don't need bad people to cause harm, just silence. The culture we were building was slower, more human, and for the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. The panel invitation arrived unexpectedly. A professional ethics forum wanted me to speak, not as a whistleblower, but as a consultant, as someone with expertise, not just experience. Standing on that stage, looking out at a room full of professionals, I felt something shift. I wasn't shaking. I spoke calmly about leadership, about accountability, about quiet systems of harm that thrive when people are taught to stay small. I didn't name Victor. I didn't need to. The story was bigger than one man. People listened. Afterward, several attendees approached me quietly. They didn't ask for advice right away. They just said, "This happened to me too." Recognition passed between us like a shared language. I went home that night feeling solid. Not loud. Not triumphant. Whole. The last chapter came on an ordinary afternoon. I returned to the old building to collect my final check. The lobby looked the same, glass walls, polished floors, but it felt different. Lighter. The fear I once carried through those doors was gone. An assistant led me to the conference room. The same room. The long table. The neatly arranged chairs. Empty now. I stood there for a moment, then slowly sat in the same seat where I had once been humiliated. I remembered how small I had felt that day, how my face burned, how my heart raced while everyone watched. I had believed that moment would break me. It hadn't. What it broke was a pattern. I realized I hadn't just left a job that morning. I had left a cycle, a belief that silence kept me safe, that being agreeable was the same as being respected. Silence hadn't protected me. It had only protected those who benefited from it. I stood up, walked toward the exit, and felt my phone buzz. One missed call. One old voicemail. Victor. I didn't listen. I deleted it. Outside, the sun was warm. The city moved on, unaware of how much had changed for me. I didn't look back at the building. I didn't need to. What mattered was ahead. For the first time, I felt free, not because I had won, but because I had chosen myself. Silence never protected me. My voice did. Yellowheart, thank you for watching till the end. If this story moved you, please like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more powerful stories. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. See you in the next one. Bye. Waving hand.